Hi, my name is Caitlin Lawrence, and I'm here to talk to you about culture shock. Many people are aware that when you go to a new country, things are different, and it can cause you to experience feelings that you never had before. And scholars describe that as culture shock, and I'm here to describe the different stages. You can think of it kind of like a W. So we're going to start off at the top. First off is the honeymoon stage. So when you first go to a country, it might be really exciting. You're fascinated by all the things that are different, and it's fun, and you just can't wait to explore more. And then pretty soon, it starts to set in that things are a little bit different, and you start to get frustrated. Maybe you're sad that your favorite food isn't available. Or I knew one guy who got frustrated that the money was different, and he went off on this rant about how the money in Europe is different than the money in America. And so you're frustrated by the differences, and this can lead to homesickness and to depression. And for some people, it doesn't last very long. For some people, it can last months, and that's okay. It's a normal feeling to have to miss home. So that's kind of like the bottom of the first U, if you will. But hopefully you'll begin to start readjusting and realigning with the culture, and again appreciating all the things that it has to offer for you. So we've gone through the first U, and now going into the second U, that's reverse culture shock. Many people might not know that when you go from the country you've been living in back to your original country, you can also experience culture shock. It starts up at the top where you're really super excited about going back home, and you might think about all the things that you're doing. And then once you get back home, you start to notice things are a little different, and it can be overwhelming. I remember the first time I came back from Europe, I stood on the cereal aisle for 20 minutes. And I was overwhelmed by the number of options. I could not figure out how to choose. I also remember looking at the money, and I was so confused, where are my $1 and $2 coins? I don't understand this currency system anymore. And so there can be confusion, there can be frustration because it's different than what you remembered. It can also be frustrating because your friends and family members didn't experience what you just experienced, and so they can't relate to you, and they don't understand why you're different and why you see the world differently. So that's kind of the bottom of the second U, if you will. And then you begin to go back to feeling normal in your everyday world, and things become familiar again. And hopefully you get to a point where you can integrate what you learned from your new culture, from your old culture, and begin to combine those two together and feel comfortable again. So that is culture shock and reverse culture shock.
Okay. Culture shock. If a person's approach is suspicion, fear, and prejudice, then the response will be criticizing, rationalization, and withdrawal.
Yeah.
This will lead to alienation and isolation.
They'll think that their way is the best way, and that other is okay.
However, an approach of openness, acceptance, and trust will lead to building a good rapport and understanding between you and the locals.
Yes.
Remember, love transcends all cultural differences.
Love does transcend all cultural differences. So culture shock. Not sure how many of you have traveled outside of your countries, but this is something that will happen to you, whether it's anticipation on your way to your location, 2 days into your location, or 3 days out from you returning back. You will go through some kind of culture shock, essentially. And what to be aware of is just how to deal with it properly. You don't want to have your mind completely shut down, not open. You have to understand that just because you've done it a certain way for 20-something years, 30-something years, 19-something years, that doesn't mean it's the way that other people do it. You can tend to alienate yourself, and that would just be so sad because you'd just be missing out on such an amazing opportunity just to get to know how others live. I know when I was in Mexico, I got irritated at the horn honking and the driving and the lack of an American-minded way structure when it came to driving. And I knew, and that seems so trivial. There can be other extremes to culture shock, but I found myself becoming ethnocentric and thinking that, well, we do it better in America. Well, I know this works better. If they were just to do it this way, if they were just to try it my way, it could be a church service. It could be how maybe churches run, how they do things in their countries. That is neither the time nor the place to start expressing what would be better if it wasn't asked of you. It's, you don't want to become, I'm trying to find the right word here, but you don't want to discredit another person's way of life just because you yourself aren't used to it. That's how kind of, hatred and fear breed. It's because it's the unknown. You don't know what to expect. So really educating yourself of the people that you're going to be meeting, of that country, of its history, maybe even, I think is something that's very helpful. So one example of culture shock, or a sign of it, is someone really making themselves maybe a little sick over it, or wanting to just be away from everyone. And that can be, an example for me is, we lived in apartments, and so there were times where you could get away with just being in your apartment all day, no one knowing, maybe people out doing their projects, and you're just staying home and watching American television. And it's just very important, if someone is staying in a hotel, or if you are staying in other people's homes, and you just have people who are just are cathartic and not wanting to leave and get out, that's just something good to pick up on. So culture shock can come differently to different people. Like for my teammates, they were more, they didn't speak Spanish. When I lived in Mexico, I did. So I had a lot easier time blending in also. I had the girl I shared my apartment with, she blonde, blue-eyed, and so definitely she stood out more taking the bus than what I would. And so I was fortunate being able to be given more free reign in the city a lot faster. And so my culture shock to me was just, it was missing things of home, missing out on relationships. And so that's where I found myself, versus my teammates had culture shock with language frustration. So they would get frustrated not being able to communicate their thoughts and what they were feeling to people. And I know they would just pull me into situations where I'm like, I don't know what I need to say, but it was funny. So yeah.
I came back to America. I was so excited. I missed home so much. I came home and I was just, like you said, completely disgusted. I was like, Americans, because Germans are amazing. They're so, what I learned when I first went to Germany is I was like, what is wrong with them? They're so rude. Like you say hi to them on the street and they're like, look at you, like, do I know you? Like, and I was like, man, they're so rude. And through my 6 months of being there, I realized they're not rude. They don't believe in superficiality. They're real. So they don't talk to you if they don't know you. But if they know, like, if once you get to know them and they're like, oh, you want to be my friend? They are like the truest, most loyal friends. It's like amazing. So once I came to appreciate that, I came back to the US and was like, oh, this superficiality is just disgusting. And like, everybody's just like, they're just like, hi, how are you? And they don't care. They don't really care. Nobody cares. And people, and even like traveling and realizing people don't really care. They're like, oh, how was your trip? Amazing. And then they're like, anyways, where are we going today? Like, they don't actually want to discuss what actually happened. They're like, they don't care. And that was really hard to deal with. Church-wise, I was at Bible school. We had the most incredible community of 90 individuals that we lived 6 months together, and we had bonded and learned how to like worship, just incredible worship. Like same thing, like we're sermon on Sunday morning and Sunday night, and just we loved it, and like being together all the time, and just not watching movies, not rushing around, like just being and like growing in the Lord. And then coming back and like this, I'm like, people come to church and they go to church for an hour. And like, what is that? Like, how can you get anything out of that? I was just like depressed and I didn't want to go to church. I was like, I'm over it. Like, nothing is as good as Bible school. I'm not going to, like, nobody gets it. And like, they're all living in the wasteland. Like, and it really took time. I had to learn. One of the biggest things God taught me was He can teach me through anyone. I can learn from any sermon, no matter how bad the speaker is or how they seem to be spiritually oppressed or like dead. God can still teach me through them. So that was huge. And yes, and same thing, it's like, I don't need to be judgmental, but that doesn't, like, these are things that can be improved, and it is good to bring your fire and passion back, but to have grace.